how are you doing? Good to see everybody. I'm sorry about that. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties today. Can everyone hear me well enough on this? I'm not in my home office today, so I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. How does it sound? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? If you would, go ahead and give me some feedback and let me know how the sound is going. So I'll know if I can do this tomorrow really quickly. I'd be curious to see, how's the sound today? So, can you hear me? Hello. If I could get some feedback really quickly. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Okay, great to see you, Melissa. Thanks for coming today. If at any point you have trouble hearing the broadcast, let me know and I'll see what I can do. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So today we're talking about consciousness. We're going to be talking about consciousness for the next 2 days. Today's going to be kind of a general introduction to consciousness. And then on Thursday, we're going to talk about sleeping and dreaming, which is a very special state of consciousness. Okay? So, let's go ahead and get started. You know, consciousness is kind of weird. It's the one thing that still puzzles psychologists. Nobody really knows what it means to be conscious. Like right now, you're listening to me, you're aware that you and I are talking, you're aware of your surroundings. But what does it actually mean from moment to moment to moment to be consciousness? Nobody really quite knows. It's one of the last real mysteries in psychology. Okay, now it's the oldest question in psychology. You know, the Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, were interested in consciousness and understanding what it was and how accurate our consciousness was. I don't know if any of you have ever read Plato's The Cave by Plato, but basically the allegory of the cave, but that was basically just his attempt to try and understand what it meant to be conscious and what it meant to have limited consciousness. Now, nobody really knows how to define it. If you go look at 100 different websites, you'll see it described in different ways. There's no universal agreement on what consciousness is. However, let's go with a general description. It's your moment-to-moment awareness of yourself and the environment that you are in. So, really, consciousness is what you're thinking about right now. No, right now. No, right now. You know what I mean? It's your moment-to-moment state of awareness. Now, what exactly does your consciousness include? Well, it includes the sensory experiences that you are seeing right now. What you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're tasting. So it involves your sensory experiences. But you know what? It's more than that too. It's also, in a sense, your introspection, your thoughts about what you are seeing and experiencing and feeling right now. It's also the memories that your sensory experiences are creating in your mind. So as you listen to me, maybe the things that I say are going to make you think about a dream that you had or a food that you ate, and that pops into your mind. That's a part of your consciousness. And then we can think of consciousness as your intentionality, your desire to do something, your choice to do something. So although there's no definition of exactly what it is, we know that it's your sensory experiences, your evaluation of those sensory experiences, your memories that are called up into your mind, and your intentionality. Good morning, Eric Vanderhoff. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for coming to the broadcast. Can you hear me well enough, Andrew? Eric, I wasn't able to be in my office today, so if you could please type in the chat bar and let me know how good the sound is coming through. Okay? Now, there are a bunch of questions that people who talk about consciousness have. Great, fantastic. I don't know if you've ever heard of the nature versus nurture debate. People talk about whether or not human beings are a product of their environment or a product of their genes. Well, when it comes to consciousness, we have some debates about the nature of consciousness. One of the debates is this idea of subjectivity. Ah, she does love this debate. Fantastic. Well, here are some consciousness debates you might like, Melissa. One is subjectivity versus objectivity. That is, do we all experience consciousness the exact same? When I bite into a banana, does it taste the same for me as it does for you, Melissa? Or is each and every person's experience subjective? The color red. Does the color red mean the same thing to me, look the same way to me as it does to you, Melissa? So the question is there an objective reality, an objective consciousness, or is each and everybody's consciousness unique to them? We also ask the question, what does it mean to be conscious? What are the minimum necessary qualities that you have in order to be conscious? We typically think of human beings as being conscious, but is a dog conscious? Does a dog have consciousness? Does a grasshopper have consciousness? What exactly does it mean to be consciously aware of the environment? And then the big question with consciousness is there a physical explanation for consciousness? Can I point to a brain activity? Can I point to a chemical? Is there some sort of way to boil your consciousness down to the material in your brain? Or do we have, if you will, a soul, something that sort of rides above our physical structures in our brain? As you are sitting here thinking about me, feeling this lecture, thinking about this lecture, is that coming from your brain, or is that some sort of magical property, if you will, non-material quality that exists over and above your brain? So we ask the question, can we reduce your consciousness down to a neuron, or is it some sort of thing that glides above your neurons? Now, we're going to talk about different ways of thinking about consciousness. A lot of people talk about conscious versus unconscious awareness. Do you believe that there are things that happen to you? Actually, let me ask you, Melissa. Let me ask you, Eric. Do you think that there are things that happen to you that maybe you've forgotten that still impact the way you think and feel right now? So let's say you were embarrassed in 4th grade, or somebody hurt your feelings. Do you think that event is still affecting you even though you're not aware of it? So to what degree do we have sort of unconscious aspects of awareness that affect us? And then it's a lot of things I don't remember until I'm in a similar situation. Exactly, but it probably is there and it's probably impacting you. When we talk about Sigmund Freud in a psychodynamic perspective later on this semester, we're going to talk about the unconscious nature of our personality and how that affects how we think and feel. And today we're going to talk a little bit about altered states of consciousness. Can we think of consciousness as changing its level? Are there different kinds of consciousness? And we're going to talk about meditation, hypnosis, and this thing called flow today, which are considered different sort of states of consciousness. Okay? Now, let's say, so going back, this idea of materialism of consciousness. Where in the brain is consciousness? If you'll remember from last week, I was talking about the modular theory of brain activity, and I told you that this part of your brain is responsible for vision. I told you this part of your brain is for memory and hearing. I suggested to you that your personality and your ability to pay attention to me is controlled in this part of the brain. We might ask the same question about consciousness. Which part of your brain controls your conscious awareness? And the weird thing is, when you measure brain activity using a PET scan or an EEG, the thing is you can't find one spot where consciousness seems to exist. So where in the cerebral cortex does consciousness come from? Well, some people say that consciousness comes from every part of the brain being active. And so the model I want you to be familiar with is called the Global Workspace Model. And this model suggests that your consciousness is this fluid process that changes based upon what part of your brain is active. So if you're listening to me right now and paying attention to my words, your consciousness is in your auditory cortex. If you're looking at me and you're paying attention to me, your consciousness is coming from your occipital lobe. If something I say causes you to start thinking about a memory that you had way back in the day, then a different part of your brain is going to be active. So the global workspace model says that consciousness isn't in one place in the brain. It just bounces all around based upon what part of our brain is active. Let me give you sort of a cool demonstration of that, demonstrated by Tong in 1998. What they used was this brain imaging technique called the fMRI. And the fMRI is a neat way that really allows you to measure where exactly in the brain activity is occurring. So they inject you with radioactive tracers that bond to glucose. And glucose is like the gas of your brain. So whenever a part of your brain is working, glucose piles up there, and we know that that part of your brain is working. So what they did was they injected people with radioactive dye, put them in the fMRI scanner, and then they showed them, if you look over here on this other side, let me see, over here, trying to point, there you go, you'll see we have three pictures. Now, at the very, very bottom is a picture of a house, and above that is a picture of a person's face. And if you remember from last week, we suggested that there's a spot called the fusiform gyrus that's active when you're looking at faces. And so they showed people a picture of a face, and you can mark exactly where in their brain that activity is occurring when they're looking at a face. They then had them look at the picture of the house, and a different part of their brain was active. So you've got two spots. When you're looking at a face, one part of your brain is active. When you're looking at a house, another part of your brain is active. What they then did was they showed people a combined picture with the face and the house superimposed. Now, when you look at this picture, the combined picture in A, what do you see? Are you seeing a face, or do you see the house? When I look at this picture, I see the face. What do you guys see, if you would, if you could tell me? I see the face. Some of you may see the house. What they did was they would then show people the superimposed picture and ask them, what do you see? And the people who reported seeing the face, the part of their brain that saw the face was active, and people who reported seeing the house part of their brain was active. And what this suggests is whatever you happen to be perceiving at the time being is determined by whichever part of your brain happens to be active. So I want you folks to be familiar with the global workspace model of consciousness. Now, here's the cool thing. It turns out that human beings have limited conscious ability. You probably don't feel your clothes right now, but your clothes are touching your body and creating sensations, but you don't pay attention to that, right? There may be a smell in your house. Maybe your mom cooked or your parents cooked spaghetti or fish last night, and there's an odor in your house, but you're not paying attention to that right now. It turns out that human beings have a limited ability to pay attention. They can't pay attention to many things at one time. In fact, we argue that human beings are what we call cognitive misers. Since we only have a limited ability to pay attention, we tend to cut out many things that aren't important. We cut out things that aren't important. So since people have limited resources for conscious attention, they restrict its use for important tasks. So, can anybody tell me, What color shirt was I wearing last Thursday in class? Does anybody know? Can anybody remember uh, what color shirt I was wearing? Why don't you remember that? Can anybody tell me why don't you remember what color shirt I was wearing yesterday? Anybody know? I'm going to sit here and wait for a response real quick. Does anybody know what color shirt I was wearing? You were. Okay, that's a good answer. Last time you were in my class, what color shirt was I wearing, Melissa? Do you remember? Ah, there you go, Angelina. You weren't looking at my shirt. You were focused on my lecture. Exactly, Angelina. The color of my shirt wasn't important to the situation. So you actually blocked it out of your conscious awareness. You know, there are two demonstrations of this limited nature of our consciousness. One is called inattentional blindness. Angelina, you were focused on my words, so you weren't looking at the color of my shirt. You, in a sense, were blind to to that particular detail in the environment. And so you weren't paying attention to that. You were demonstrating inattentional blindness. I'll bet if I asked you Thursday, Angelina, to tell me what color shirt I was wearing today, you'll be able to tell me because I've drawn your attention to my shirt. But a lot of times when we're not paying attention to things, they actually slip right below our level of consciousness. On the other hand, an even weirder demonstration is this thing we call change blindness. A lot of times people don't even pay attention to changes that happen in their environment. If you would, look in the picture in the bottom left-hand corner of this page, you're going to see what's called the change blindness study. What they do is this guy with the white piece of paper is asking for instructions. Okay, he's asking for directions. He approaches a guy on the street, the old guy in the blonde with the silver hair. Now, as this silver-haired guy is giving instructions, what happens is somebody carrying a big piece of wood or a door will walk between the person asking for directions and the person giving directions. And what you'll notice is they switch the people asking the directions as this board moves through. And you know what? About 50% of the time, people don't even notice that the person asking them the question has changed. In fact, they've even tried this experiment where they'll switch from a man to a woman, and some people don't even notice when the person they are talking to changes sex. It's really weird how we tend to focus on certain aspects of our environment and lots of other things escape our consciousness. You know, if you're one of those great detectives, you probably have that consciousness that doesn't miss details. But most people miss details because their consciousness is focused in a very narrow area. So what I want you to get from this particular page is that our consciousness is very limited. We only can pay attention to just a few things at any given time. Can you turn it down a little? Thank you so much. Okay, great. Sorry, somebody was going to turn the music up. Okay, now, another cool demonstration of consciousness, this really weird thing, as I suggested to you, consciousness is dependent upon whatever part of your brain is active. Well, it turns out that the left half of your brain is the part of your brain that can talk, and the right part of your brain is the part of your brain that can't talk. So whenever you see something, in order to talk about it, it has to get into the left part of your brain. All right? Now, our vision, just like the left half of our brain controls the right half of our body, and the right half of our brain controls the left half of our body, check this out. The right half of our brain sees the left half of our world, and the left half of the brain sees the right half of the world. Okay? Now, and so you've got sort of a left hemifield for vision and a right hemifield for vision. All right? And this is called the contralateral design, the fact that the left part of your brain controls your right world and the right half of your brain controls the left world. Well, what they do is, if you'll notice the picture over here on the side, I'm showing you the corpus callosum. The thing is, if something comes in the left half of your field of vision, it goes to the right part of your brain that can't talk. And so if I ask you a question, the right half of your brain can't tell me what you're seeing. Instead, that information has to cross from the right half of your brain to the left half of your brain via the corpus callosum. All right? Well, it turns out that sometimes doctors slice the corpus callosum in half. There are people who have really bad seizures and they don't have any medicine to fix these seizures. So these people, occasionally doctors will cut the corpus callosum in half and it makes these people's seizures go away. The weird thing though is if you take this person and have them stare at a dot and show them something on the left half of their visual field and ask them what they see, they won't be able to tell you what it is they see. So for example, if I had you do what's called a split brain experiment, okay, which you have the split brain, I ask you to stare at a dot. If I show you a hammer on the left side of your field of vision and ask you what you are looking at, you won't be able to tell me. However, if I give you a picture of three things and one of them is a hammer and I ask you to point to the object that you see, you'll actually be able to point to the object because it's on the right side of your brain, which can touch things. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So, the point being is that consciousness is this moment-to-moment awareness of what's going on and the memories that this moment-to-moment awareness stirs. This moment-to-moment awareness is not controlled in any one part of your brain. Instead, it bounces around depending upon whether you're focusing on what you hear, focusing on what you see, or focusing on things that you remember, right? And so your consciousness is this weird thing that just depends upon where activity is bouncing around in your brain. Now, so here we go, the commissurotomy. All right, I'm sorry. So not all functions are bilaterally produced. I forgot this slide right here. Okay, so the commissurotomy is when they cut the corpus callosum in half. Okay, and again, a person can't talk about images that appear in the left visual field, only the right visual field, because the right visual field goes to the left brain, which can talk, and the left visual field goes to the right brain, which can't talk. You know, there are actually people who have what's called hemineglect. These people, this occurs when they have a stroke in the right side of their brain. These people actually quit paying attention to the left side of their world. And the crazy thing is, if you have them draw a picture, they will only draw the right side of objects. So if you ask a person with hemineglect to draw a square, they'll only draw the right half of the square. They'll forget to draw the left half of the square. If you have them draw a circle, they'll only draw a semicircle. They'll draw the right half of the circle, but they will actually forget the left half of the circle. And you know, the crazy thing is, sometimes people demonstrate this weird nature, this sort of partial, this distributed nature of vision through what's called blind sight. Some people who have a stroke in their occipital lobe, they won't actually be able to see an object, but they can tell you where that object is because they're aware of the object's location, but not what the object is. So again, hemineglect, blind sight, inattentional blindness, change blindness. What all these things suggest is that consciousness is this weird complex thing that is composed of all the different parts of your brain working together from moment to moment doing different things. Okay, hold on, let's see. All right, so, hold on, let me see what we got here. All right, now, let's talk a little bit about altered states of consciousness. Have any of you ever meditated? Any of you in the audience, have any of you ever meditated? Every summer I go to up north to this hippie camp, and I meditate while I'm there. I usually go up and meditate for 3 weeks. Melissa meditates, fantastic. Angelina meditates, fantastic. What do you notice? What are you supposed to do when you meditate? Does anybody can you describe what the goal is when you meditate? Or to clear your mind, right, right. Have any of you ever noticed when you're sitting around not doing anything, you are thinking about all kinds of things? Anybody ever sit in their house and just think, you know? Exactly, be present. Do you ever, when you sit around and nobody's talking to you, do you folks ever have it where all kinds of things are running through your mind? What you did today, what somebody said to you that bothers you, what you're looking at. You ever notice how your mind just sort of bounces around to different things? Okay, that's the typical nature of consciousness. But in meditation, the whole goal of meditation is to take your consciousness and stop it and to focus on one thing. Exactly, telling yourself stories. Instead, Angelina, what we're supposed to do is we are supposed to be present, to be in the moment. So I've learned to control my thoughts through meditation. Nice, Melissa. Most people, one of the things that happens to people is they can't control their mind. And when people are left alone and sit around, their mind starts thinking about things. And it turns out most people tend to think about things that make them sad or unhappy when they're not doing anything, right? So the goal of meditation actually is to learn how to control your mind so it doesn't bounce around like that. And so people think of meditation as an altered state of consciousness where you learn how to control your consciousness. You, in a sense, yoke it. What you're doing is you're tying and controlling the mind. All right. Now, I see Melissa, Angelina, both of you meditate or have meditated. I don't know if you know this, but meditation is really, really good for you because it actually, regular practice of it actually improves your health measure. Your blood pressure is going to go down. Your stress hormones are going to go down, which takes your glucose and cholesterol levels down. When people are stressed out, their body increases the amount of fat and the amount of sugar in the blood system for energy, because when you're stressed out, you have that fight or flight response. And so cholesterol building up in your blood, too much sugar in your blood, is not good for you. So people who learn how to meditate and lower their level of arousal have lower levels of cholesterol and glucose levels, which decreases their stress, their negative emotions, and their depression. And what are you doing when you're meditating? You are trying to stop this part of your brain called the default mode network. This is the area of your brain that is active when you're sitting around in your house alone thinking. And it turns out that when we have what's called a task positive network, so parts of your brains are active when we're focused on something. But when you're not focused on anything, your brain isn't inactive. Actually, just a different part of your brain becomes active, and that's called the default mode network. And this is the part of the brain that causes you to think about things and to ruminate when you are bored at home. And it turns out that when people's default mode network is going, they tend to think about themselves, they think about the past, and they tend to think about negative things that make them sad. And so it turns out, Melissa, by learning how to control your mind, you can decrease the activity of the default mode network, and it decreases these unhappy and sad thoughts that tend to bounce in your mind that cause people to get stressed out and sad, right? So meditation, it's a way of controlling or altering your consciousness. Now, another form of altered consciousness is hypnosis. In fact, you know what? Hypnosis is why I became a psychologist. When I was in 8th grade, I went to a science camp, and we had this psychologist hypnotize me. And I thought it was so cool, I decided, wow, I want to become a psychologist and learn more about hypnosis, right? Now, hypnosis is, some people say, is a form of altered interaction where you get into such a state that a person can, you are open to suggestion. You become highly open to suggestion. So hypnosis is a social interaction during which a person, you, can respond to suggestions by another person who can actually cause you to have experiences and memory changes and perceptions that maybe aren't there. So a person who is hypnotized can feel pain, they can feel heat, they can be talked into having all of these sensory experiences that really don't exist. They are in an altered state of consciousness, so some people think. Now, here's the deal. When I was hypnotized, it felt incredibly real to me. It felt incredibly real to me. However, some people say that hypnosis is not a real thing. It depends. So there are actually two theories of hypnosis. If you're asking me, I would support the dissociation theory. In my opinion, conscious awareness becomes separated from other parts of our conscious and dissociated. So in a sense, your consciousness becomes separated and a person gets in control of it. That's what we call the dissociation theory. These people think that that hypnotism is a real altered state. On the other hand, you have cynics who say, you know what, you're not really feeling that heat. You are instead just trying to play a role because you want to fit in with other people. If you're one of the people that doesn't believe in hypnosis, you would probably support the sociocognitive theory that says that people are just playing a role. Now, when I was hypnotized and the hypnotist told me that my hands were in a vise and I couldn't get them apart, okay, they would say that I'm pretending that I can't get them apart just to make the hypnotist happy. I, on the other hand, really believed that my hands were in a vise and I couldn't get them apart. So, is hypnosis really an altered state of consciousness or not? It depends on what you believe. Now, here's the thing. Some people go to hypnotists because they want to make life changes. I don't know if you've ever heard of somebody going to a hypnotist to lose weight or to stop smoking, all right? Now, what they say is that as a general rule, post-hypnotic suggestions don't really work. If you go into a hypnotist and talk to them and they tell you that you don't want to smoke anymore and cigarettes are really nasty, while you're under hypnosis, you will think that cigarettes are really nasty and you won't want to smoke them. But the evidence suggests that after you come out of that state of hypnosis, you probably will go back to the way you used to be. All right. However, there is evidence to suggest that you can use hypnosis to actually control pain. So there are people who treat pain by hypnosis. And the crazy thing is, if you put the fMRI on somebody's brain who's in pain and hypnotize them, the part of their brain that registers pain will actually quit activating, almost as if the hypnotic suggestion really is decreasing the pain in their brain. Now, the weird thing is, not everybody can be hypnotized. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to be hypnotized, and some of you maybe haven't. Some people are not open to being hypnotized, and so it really depends upon each and every person. Now, one final point that I wanted to make about consciousness is that there's this other state of consciousness that some psychologists are interested in. Have any of you ever, Angelina, Melissa, I see you're still in the lecture. Have you ever been doing something that you really, really like a whole lot, and you get so into it that you actually forget how much time has passed? Have any of you ever had that experience where you're just doing something that's so much fun that you just focus on it and you forget what time of day it is or what's going on? Have you ever had that experience? I have, and it's an absolutely amazing experience. If you've ever been in that particular state, you are in, every time I spend time with a friend, there you go, Melissa. There you go. Okay. Well, if you are, then you have achieved what they call a state of flow. Now, this psychologist, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I can't say his name. He's a Russian psychologist. Was very interested in this concept of flow. And athletes and other people who perform at high levels, one of the things that sports psychologists train them to do is how to achieve a state of flow. Because when people get into this altered state of flow, they become super duper productive, super duper creative, and whatever they're doing really rises to another level of performance. So flow is this highly focused, altered state of consciousness where you actually forget about yourself, you forget about time, and everything seems to disappear, and it's only you and that activity, right? And flow is typically viewed as a desirable state of consciousness. In fact, like I said, what sports psychologists try to get high-level athletes to do is try to forget everything else except the activity that they're engaged in. And if you can achieve a state of flow, if you can achieve a state of flow, what you will typically find is you will be highly productive, and whatever you create will be incredibly awesome. And it's because what you've done is your consciousness has focused down on the one activity that you are interested in. Now, some people are better at achieving flow than are other people. Highly productive people are people who can get into a state of flow. A lot of people have trouble getting into flow, and when they're trying to do something, they've got other things that are always bouncing into their consciousness and sort of distracting them, and they have trouble really getting engrossed in a particular activity, right? But for people who can achieve flow, it turns out that people are more likely to get into a state of flow when they're doing something that's pretty challenging that they are really good at. So if you're a really good painter and you're trying to paint a really difficult picture, you're more likely to get into a state of flow than if you're a really good painter doing a color by numbers paint job, right? So flow tends to happen when skill and challenge are similar and above average. If you're good at something and you're really challenging yourself, what you're going to find is that you will sometimes lose track of time and you fall into that activity, and it really, really becomes an enjoyable experience for you. Now, what kind of applications will you see for flow? I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Montessori education. In Montessori education, the learner picks what they want to learn and focus on. Unlike regular education, where I, the teacher, decide what you're going to learn, in Montessori education, the student picks what they want to learn based upon their level and their interest. And so you can think of Montessori education as an educational style where they try to keep the child in a state of flow. And the idea is that Montessori education is thought to produce better educational outcomes, because when people are engrossed in something and when they're being challenged at it, their productivity and their effectiveness really, really increases. Now, as I suggested to you, sports psychologists teach sports athletes how to get, quote, in the zone. If you've ever been in the zone where you're playing tennis and every shot is just perfect and you're just kicking butt, or if you've ever been playing golf and every golf shot is perfect and you sort of lose track of everything, you are what we would call in the zone. You are what a sports psychologist would say in the zone, or what a psychologist would say you are experiencing flow. And I don't know if any of you are musicians, if you've ever played music before, but if you're playing and you're jamming with a bunch of people and you really are feeling the music and you're all together, Some people musicians will refer to that as being in the pocket. What that means is you as a band are achieving a state of flow. Okay? So, what I want you to know from today, let me go back, I've got a couple of minutes, so let's review what we've talked about today. Okay? Consciousness is this really weird thing that nobody seems to know exactly what it's like. It's probably one of the oldest psychological phenomenon to be studied, starting with the Greek philosophers. We know it bounces around to different parts of your brain depending upon what you happen to be focusing on. It could be things that happened to you a while back. It could be things that you're feeling and thinking. It could be sensory experiences that you're having. And depending upon what you're consciously aware of, different parts of your brain will be activated. People's consciousness is so limited, people's ability to be consciously aware of things is so limited that a lot of times we miss obvious things in our environment because our consciousness is focused in on one part of our environment. Right? Now, split brain experiences, like this particular page, and meditation, split brain experiments as well as divided attention experiments demonstrate this limited nature and localized nature of our consciousness, right? And then there are different sort of states of consciousness. There's that consciousness when we learn to yoke our consciousness and focus it in on one thing and try to control our consciousness. There are some people who say that our consciousness can be massaged by another person called a hypnotist who causes you to go into another state of consciousness. And sometimes we achieve this bizarre state of consciousness when we're so focused on something that the world seems to disappear and it's just us and the activity. These are different states of consciousness. Now, on Thursday when we get to class, we're going to talk about this very bizarre form of consciousness that all of us go through every day. We're going to talk about sleeping and dreaming on Thursday, and that's a different form of consciousness that we're going to save and talk about on Thursday. Angelina, Melissa, do you have any questions before I cut this broadcast off? I do want you to remember tomorrow night at 7 p.m., we have our bi-weekly webinar. You are encouraged to come to the bi-weekly webinar. If not, I'll just meet you Thursday morning in class. Okay. That's all I had to say. Have a great day. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Take care.